Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again to an episode of Orange Weekly presented by Crouse Health. My name is Brent Axe, and we are live here on the Syracuse Orange football Facebook page, Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page. We're live on YouTube as well. Maybe you're watching this sometime in the future on YouTube. We appreciate that. Lots of ways to catch the show live. We stream on Facebook and YouTube around noon-ish. Today we're doing more like 12:30-ish Eastern time, somewhere in that noon hour every Thursday. So if you want to join live, get your comments and questions, interaction with the show, hey, come on by. We're here every Thursday at about noonish Eastern time doing this live, but you can always watch the replay later. As mentioned, we put a post up on syracuse.com. We take the YouTube clip, we embed it in our social media channels as well. So make sure you're following all that. If you're watching on Facebook right now, you're already doing that. So thanks for doing so. You get a little notification when the show comes on live as well. So live sometime in the future, whenever you're watching the program, we do appreciate that. We got a couple of things to cover for you today on the Syracuse football and basketball front. But hey, right off the bat, shout out to Syracuse men's soccer, who will play in their first NCAA tournament game at home. I should say their first NCAA tournament game, their highest seeded NCAA tournament game. This has been an incredible season for men's soccer. It's one of their best regular seasons ever. They just won the ACC championship. They're seeking their first national championship, a return trip to the Final Four. They also went there in 2015, or the College Cup as it's called in the world of soccer. So shout out to Ian McIntyre, the head coach of that team, and great season so far, but so much more could be accomplished. They will play Sunday at the SU Soccer Stadium at 2:00. They will face the winner of Penn and Rutgers, who actually plays tonight. So we're not sure who their opponent is, but the men's soccer team could have a lot of home games coming up here. So get on out there. You watch some of these European soccer matches and you see crazy fans. The fans that show up to these games, they're loud, they're into it, and it's a pretty cool environment. So shout out to SU men's soccer, who's had a heck of a run and could do some big things here coming up. We will start with basketball. We'll get to some football issues as Syracuse is going to play Wake Forest on Saturday night, of course, trying to snap a 4-game losing streak. So football to come here. Let's start with basketball, though. And right off the bat, we'd like to say happy birthday to Jim Boeheim. Yes, today is Coach Boeheim's birthday, and he is 50 years old. Now, of course, Coach, a little older than that, 78, and still going strong as the head coach of the Syracuse basketball Orange. So happy birthday, Coach, right off the bat. Didn't have a good birthday week so far, though, as Syracuse, of course, lost a game to Colgate earlier this week. Thanks to Brian, who's watching us in Massachusetts today. He's got that Z89 background there. Shout out to Z89 people out there, of which I am. I'm the answer to a trivia question. I'm one of the rare Z89 alums that did not go to Syracuse University. How about that? So what's up, Brian? Good to see you, man. Yeah, not a good week for the Orange. And look, it's one thing when Colgate comes in last year and has this unbelievable game where they hit 18 three-pointers, walk away with the first win over Syracuse since the early 1960s. And you're like, okay, look, it's just, I don't want to say a fluke because that's not what it was, because Matt Langle has built a terrific program at Colgate. They've made the NCAA tournament 3 of the last 4 years. They're a consistent winner in the Patriot League. He's recruiting well down there. So I don't want to say it's a fluke, but let's be honest here. This is Syracuse, and Colgate's been their bye game for years. One of those teams you put on the schedule, local connection. It's great that they play. Syracuse has played no opponent more than Colgate in its history 174 times, right? So it's great that they do that. But now Colgate's got a 2-game winning streak over you. And Colgate's got the better team. And that's not just my opinion. That's Jim Boeheim's opinion, who said at the press conference the other night after Syracuse lost that Colgate is the much better team than Syracuse at this point. That's a pretty sobering admission, albeit a correct admission from Jim Boeheim. And Colgate comes in this year, and boy, I was so wrong about this. I was on the radio earlier this week, and I'm like, look, if Colgate wins, don't be surprised. But I know they're not going to come in and hit 18 three-pointers again. Yeah, because they hit 19. Yeah. So, look, Syracuse has a problem with movement right now. They're not moving the ball on offense, and they're not moving on defense. And I understand that it's early in the year, but it was also early in the year for Colgate, and they looked organized. They looked exactly where they knew where to go with the ball on offense. They hustle on defense. They play as a team. And I understand that Matt Langle's team has a lot more veteran presence on it than Syracuse, but I don't want to hear it's only game 2. I don't want to hear it's early in the year. Colgate was playing in its 4th game as opposed to Syracuse, which was playing in its 2nd, and they had a week and change off. So, I mean, factor all that in, it doesn't matter. I mean, you got smoked by Colgate. Colgate led that game for 89% of the time. So there's a little bit of a red flag up already for this basketball team. And look, Jim Boeheim will be the first to tell you, don't call it a young team, right? Because there are veteran, experienced players out there like Jesse Edwards, like Joe Girard. Benny Williams, who had a great game on Tuesday night, had 17 points and 8 rebounds, very active around the basket as he needed to be. And, you know, the veterans on this team, throw Symir Torrance in there, have to carry the load, but there's a lot of young guys trying to contribute at this point. And the biggest name that pops there is Judah Mintz, who had another great game. You know, he had 20 points, led Syracuse in scoring. He had 16 points in the Lehigh game, the opening night win for the Orange just over a week ago. So here you have Judah Mintz, who's a terrific offensive player, not afraid to take it to the rack, not afraid to take over and distribute the ball when needed, but offensive-minded player. But, man, this team they play hero ball. They play individual ball. Jim Boeheim's offense tends to set that up, more iso ball than anything. Compare that to Colgate. And I know different styles, different teams, but compare that to Colgate, who's moving the ball. That's all they did. It's not like Colgate came in and ran some kind of funky offense that Syracuse had never seen. Here's what they did. They moved the ball till somebody was open and hit a lot of open shots. So last year, the problem with Syracuse was they were not athletic enough, right? On defense in particular. And statistically, eye test, everything you could think of, that defense was terrible. It was one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. And you'd say, okay, that's just what that team was. So what's the story with this year's team? It's very, very early in the season, so I want to leave room for improvement here. But this is why we heard from Jim Boeheim throughout the offseason, and he said, well, we're going to run some man-to-man. And everybody's like, yeah, sure you are, right? I've heard that song and dance before, but it's happened. They have run man-to-man defense, and Tuesday night, it didn't matter what defense they were in. 2-3 zone, they went to a 1-3-1 man-to-man for a while. Didn't matter. This team can't play defense right now. So if you can't move the ball and you don't have an organization on offense, you can't track down people on defense, that's going to be a problem against good teams like Colgate, right? And think about what I'm saying here. Good teams like Colgate. Again, shout out to Matt Langle and what he's done there. But you're not supposed to come in and own Syracuse 2 years in a row. Syracuse had a 17-2 lead in the game last year and ended up losing by 15 points at the end, 185. It's funny how Colgate hit more three-pointers this year than they did in that game, but the score wasn't quite as high. It was 80-68, a much more efficient three-point night for Colgate, so that in 2 years, they've made 37 three-pointers on Syracuse. So that's something that's got to be fixed immediately. And how do you fix it, right? When you've got a combination of young and older players. Colgate knew where they were going with the ball, and they knew who their leaders were, and they knew exactly what to do and how to do it. Whereas Syracuse looked disorganized out there. You know, a lot of, as we said, a lot of iso ball, a lot of hero ball, if you will. Joe Girard just feels like he's got to take over. And when he's not hitting, he was 4 of 12 in that game, and every shot he took, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was a 3-point shot because they're trying to get Syracuse back into that game. It's a recipe for disaster, as we saw. So going forward, how Syracuse fixes that is going to be interesting. I believe Northeastern's a team that Syracuse should beat. By the way, let me look this up while we're talking about it here, because I'm pretty sure they changed the time of that game on Saturday. I think that Northeastern game, let me look it up here while we're talking about it. Yep, Mike Waters. Oh, are we talking about the same game here? So they did move the Northeastern game to 4:00. It was originally scheduled for 2:00. And they've also moved another tip time while we're discussing it here. I can tell you about this, but let me make sure we've got our tip times correct, because Saturday is, so the Northeastern game this Saturday is going to be a 4:00 tip time. They actually moved the Bryant tip time as well. While we're on the subject here, as Mike Waters notes on syracuse.com, SU Bryant was originally set for 7 p.m., They have moved that game to 4 p.m. because Syracuse-Boston College football is going to kick off on 7:30. Now, we're talking about next weekend, a couple days after Thanksgiving. So this Saturday, you've got a 4 o'clock tip against Northeastern. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Adam, for confirming that this weekend. And then the football team plays at 8 o'clock, right? Northeastern's a team I would think Syracuse can beat, but I'm not taking anything for granted at this point, right? So what this team has to do is just move the ball better. And that comes down to your freshman point guard who's offensively talented. And I like Judah Mintz. I like his confidence. Kid's got some moxie out there, but just move the ball better and look for the open shooter. And they just need better movement on defense. What you see there is a team that's thinking on the court. They're not playing the game. What Colgate did is they knew exactly where to go and how to do it, and they played the game, right? That comes with experience. That comes with time. That comes with chemistry. I get that. But you can make up for a lot of these issues with hustle. And I'm not saying Syracuse didn't play hard, but just get to your guy. Just put hands up, run, move your feet on defense, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. You got Northeastern. Next week, you got Richmond. And what will probably end up being St. John's could be Temple in New York City next week. So a couple of early challenges for the Orange. As you go through the schedule, you got some teams like who can you take for granted anymore? At first glance, before the season started, you say, okay, that's not quite as bad of a non-conference slate as, say, maybe Syracuse got last year. That non-conference slate was a bear, and you knew it going in to the schedule. But upcoming here, so Northeastern, Richmond on Monday night at the Barclays Center, either St. John's or Temple. Bryant is not a pushover. Charles Pride, local product on that team. That's a team that could come in and beat Syracuse. Wouldn't be stunned to see that. Then you turn around 2 days later and go to Illinois in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and then you go to Notre Dame a couple days later. On the road, ACC game right off the bat. Like, this schedule does not get easier with the exception of Northeastern, which is a team that Syracuse should absolutely, and I think will beat on Saturday at the Dome. So startling for sure, long season to go, but some big strides. It's almost like, sometimes when you go up the stairs, you skip a couple of stairs, right? When you're feeling it. Syracuse is in their progress has got to skip a couple of stairs and make some big moves here. And playing better teams, you would think, you would hope, would help that process, but could also work against you in a weird way as well. So not stunning to see Syracuse lose to Colgate, but still sitting here with the Orange in a 2-game hole against Colgate. First time that's happened since the early 1960s is a little surprising in one sense, right? So anything you guys want to hop in on basketball, please do. And we'll highlight some of those comments, answer some of your questions there, but pretty much spoke for itself, right? Move the ball, move on defense, disorganization on offense. And Syracuse got, kind of a spoonful of bitter medicine from Colgate Tuesday night at the Dome. Moving on to football, you got Syracuse and Wake Forest coming up here. And yeah, it's been a bad week all around here for football and basketball. That football team's licking its wounds after a 38-3 loss to Florida State to close out the home portion of the schedule last week. And this is an interesting game. Wake Forest is on a 3-game losing streak themselves. Syracuse on a 4-game losing streak at this point, right? So of these two teams, who snaps the streak and what gives them the advantage to do it? Syracuse has not scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. That's the first time that's happened since 1994. As a matter of fact, they lost 3 of their last 4 games in 1994 and didn't score a touchdown in any one of those games, right? I think it was a 7-4 season for Paul Pasqualoni and company. So that's not good. And the big reason why the offense has stalled, of course, has been the health of quarterback Garrett Schrader. Schrader this week talked to the media for the first time in about a month. The Syracuse players are made available every Tuesday, and we had not seen QB1 there for a few games and a few weeks. He was there Tuesday. He said that he has gotten exponentially healthier. He feels the offense will get back into gear this week. He's feeling a lot better. And call me crazy, but I believe him. You know what? Garrett Schrader, there's just something convincing about the way that he, and, they don't want to give away anything game plan wise and detail wise, but I feel like he does feel like he's at the point where he can move a little bit better, throw the ball on the run a little bit better, and run the football better, because if he can't, that offense just stalls. But, man, there's just been some concerning things about how predictable the Syracuse offense has been, how Sean Tucker can't get it going, whether by his coach is not giving him the ball enough or when he gets opportunities, defenses that have keyed in on him and have slowed him down from those big breakaway plays. That's been an issue. The receivers have not gotten open. Aronde Gatson, all of a sudden, 2 games in a row, has been shut down by both Pittsburgh and Florida State. I don't think you can keep him down long, particularly if Schrader's back out there and can find him. But this offense has got to get receivers open. The offensive line can't block. They have given up a lot of pressure to either Carlos Del Rio Wilson or Garrett Schrader, who no matter who's been in the past couple of weeks, the run lanes have not been there. And penalties have been a big problem. I mean, I feel like it's Groundhog Day here because we've talked about penalties all year long, and it doesn't get better. They had 10 penalties last week against Florida State. And again, a lot of that is procedure penalties. A lot of that is offsides. There's a couple of players, Carlos Vettorello and Wes Hoa, who commit a lot of these penalties, frankly. They're penalty-prone guys, and that doesn't get better. So that's all going to get better this week. Now, what could be the elixir for this offense is, as much as Wake Forest can score and has a terrific quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC and in the country, frankly, and Sam Hartman, their defense is not good. They're 11th in the ACC. They're 83rd in the country in scoring defense. You can put points up on Wake Forest. Now, the problem is they can score at will, too. Wake Forest, they're on a 3-game losing streak. They've got their issues. And the good news for Syracuse there is Wake Forest does not have a running game to speak of. Syracuse's defense has had big-time problems stopping the run in its last 4 games. They've given up 930 yards rushing in the last 4 games. And that brings up something that I think Syracuse needs to do more of, by the way, and that's put more people on the field to run the ball. Okay, that's not a slight on Sean Tucker, but when you have 2 players, sometimes 3 players, Syracuse does not. But what we've seen from opponents the past 4 weeks is multiple players that can run the football. Florida State had it. Florida State's got 3 guys that can run the ball that have all gotten in the end zone, all have over 500 yards rushing, and that multi-prong attack can wear down a defense. Pitt didn't even have its best running back. It is Abanikanda, but they had backups that could do it, right? Last 4 games, we've seen it happen. Clemson had Will Shipley come in and run all over Syracuse, and he's one of the better players at his position in the ACC, right? But multi-prong attacks, 2-3 guys running the ball. Syracuse doesn't do that. It makes them predictable. So I think we need to start to see more LaQuinn Allen on the field. It wouldn't hurt to put LaQuinn Allen on the field to get him some reps and get him some time, considering by all accounts, I think Sean Tucker's gone after this year, right? We already know Matthew Bergeron is gone. Matthew Bergeron this week accepted a bid to go to the Senior Bowl, which is the premier NFL showcase all-star game. So he gone, right? I think Tucker's gone. I'm pretty sure Mikel Jones is gone, and I know we're on both sides of the ball now, but considering the number of NFL prospects this team has on it, the bowl game will allow this team 15 extra practices. So that will get LaQuinn Allen acclimated. He'll play a lot in the bowl game, I would imagine, but why wait for that? And Dino was asked about that this week, and Dino's answer was, we've tried both. We've tried the multi-prong attack, but when you have a special player like Sean Tucker, you got to try and get him the ball. And I get what he's saying there, but it's time to see other players run the ball. Because what we've been saying is run Sean Tucker more. And I still want to see that. But now it's time to get more bodies on the field, especially Tucker seems to be healthy and back to himself, thankfully, health-wise. But watching other teams just tear apart the Syracuse defense, which is lacking depth right now, and look, everybody's injured at this time of the year. I think it's time to see a little bit more of that. So hopefully with Schrader returning to the offense, it brings a spark back to it. They're playing a defense that has given up some points and some yards this year. And, they're playing a team that can't run the football. The problem is they can sling it. And Sam Hartman's one of the better quarterbacks they're going to face. I talked to Mikel Jones about that this week, and he said that Hartman reminds him of Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback. Remember, came in and that game was wild. That was a back-and-forth game. O'Connell threw the ball at will. Charlie Jones, his receiver that day, had a heck of a game. Not that Wake Forest has a star receiver like that, but Sam Hartman can spread it out. And There's 3 or 4 receivers on this team that have big numbers, that have scored, 4 or 5 touchdowns apiece. And this Syracuse secondary is really going to be tested. It has been the run defense that's been tested in recent weeks. Now it's going to be the secondary that gets tested. And remember, Garrett Williams is out. So can Deuce Chestnut step up? Deuce Chestnut missed a big tackle last week. He's made some plays on this team as well. Don't get me wrong. But this secondary that's down to a couple of second-level guys now, and I've been impressed with Isaiah Johnson. Jahad Carter's played great. He was banged up last week a little bit, though, so you got to see what the status is of some of these players that have the owies, as Dino Babers likes to say. It's just a defense that's going to be challenged. So is the offense up to matching points on Wake Forest? It's going to be mid-40s, about 50 degrees Saturday night in Wake Forest. I'm not sure about the wind. We'll have to see what the wind situation is, because you got Syracuse going outdoors for its last 2 games, this one in Boston College coming up next week. And I wrote about this earlier in the week. I hope you can check out the column. And my colleague Nate Mink at syracuse.com has pointed this out as well. Syracuse is fighting history now. No matter what happens in the last 2 games, they're going to a bowl game. However, if they do end up losing out, start 6-0, finish 6-6, they would become just the 3rd team ever that's done that. Ron Zook at Illinois did it in 2011. They fired Ron Zook. Jim Grove did it in 2016. Now, he was probably going to be a temporary coach at Baylor anyway. Remember, he came in the transition, the Art Briles scandal at Baylor. That team starts 6-0. They finish 6-6. He gets fired. Does John Wildhack want to be the first athletic director that keeps a coach on board that won his first 6 games but lost his last 6, bowl game or not? It's not unprecedented for a coaching change to happen with a bowl game. Syracuse went to a bowl game in 2004. They got smoked in that game by Georgia Tech in the Champs Sports Bowl, and Paul Pasqualoni got fired after that. So I don't think that's going to happen here. I think Wildhack will become the first AD to do it. I don't think they're going to pay Dino Babers $10 million to not coach Syracuse, then go out and hire a new coaching staff. So I don't think that's going to happen. But boy, win one of your last 2 games and you avoid that pitfall. Who wants to be 3rd on that list? 7-5, dare I say 8-4, looks a heck of a lot better than 6-6, which is a blah record anyway. But 6-6, having lost your last 6 games, no bueno. Nobody wants to be talking about that, bowl game or not. So look, the offense has to wake up, put some more bodies out there, find the open receivers. Schrader, who says he's about as close to full health as he's been, doing Garrett Schrader things. The other thing that the Wake Forest offense does, I mean, they score and they can move the ball. They do turn the ball over. You can get some takeaways on Wake Forest. And Syracuse's defense, their takeaway rate has gone up this year. They're picking the ball off a lot more. They're causing fumbles. There's actually been, I think, 5 fumbles they've caused that they have not recovered. So this is more of a defense that's in a ball hawk mode and is back to what they need to be. And they're going to need to do both of those things. Look, it's Sam Hartman's senior game, his last ride at Wake Forest, and they're just as desperate for a win. And you tend to favor the home teams in that situation. Wake Forest, I've seen as either a 9 or a 10-point favorite overall in this game. So let's see what Syracuse has, right? Let's see what kind of pride they show. Let's see what kind of wrinkles they can show in the offense. Let's see, what this team can kind of, suck it up and do this week after 4 straight losses. And in the last few, they've just been owned, right? The Clemson game was one thing because they were in it until the 4th quarter. The sideline hit happens, and that's almost been like a curse that's been put on this team because they haven't won since then. But, you go through what's happened after that, and it's just been a free fall. They haven't scored a touchdown in the past 2 games. Teams are running all over Syracuse, right? Multi-prong attacks, and just, to not even see this team competitive against Florida State. The Pittsburgh game, at least they were in that thing as much as it was a low-scoring, ugly game. They were in that thing all the way. Florida State, they were out of that before the end of the first quarter. And you can see it by how that team was playing. So I think you just want to see a team play a real football game here and hopefully go in and get a win over Wake Forest and avoid that pitfall of being one of 3 teams to start 6-0 and finish 6-6 with 6 straight losses. So just a programming reminder, we will be with you Saturday night after that matchup. We will not have post-game for basketball this week for Northeastern. We will be on full football coverage as normal here on the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page, on YouTube, on Twitter, And you can always watch the post-game show whenever you want on YouTube, embedded in my recap on syracuse.com and all the usual places you catch the replay if you can't catch the show live. So that's our plan for Saturday. It's going to be a busy Saturday. Syracuse Northeastern basketball at 4 o'clock. Syracuse Wake Forest football at 8 o'clock. We mentioned the soccer team is playing on Sunday in the NCAA tournament, either Penn or Rutgers in that matchup. Syracuse women's basketball team, shout out to them. Felicia Leggett-Jack keeps piling up wins here early. They actually play Thursday night. We're talking here on Thursday live. They play LIU at the Dome Thursday night as their season continues to develop here. And Daisha Fair and Tisha Hyman have been the dynamic duo in that backcourt for the Orange. Interesting to see that team push the pace, want to score a lot of points, shoot a lot of threes, be aggressive on defense. Frankly, I think the men's team could take a lesson from Felicia Leggett-Jack's team and how they hustle, how they play hard, how they move the ball, move on defense. So we'll see if that team keeps winning. And we're just in that busy time of year. So obviously we will not be here. Another programming note, there will be no Orange Weekly next week because it's Thanksgiving. So we will not be here next week for this program. But typically you can pin Thursdays around noonish Eastern time that we do the show for you live on Facebook, on YouTube. And you can always find the archived replay on YouTube and on our social media channels whenever you want. So thanks for hanging with us today. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate the great comments that we had throughout the program. And we'll talk to you again Saturday night. Going to be a late one, 8 o'clock kick. So about 11-ish Eastern time after that game's over. And we'll recap what Syracuse is hoping is the snapping of a 4-game losing streak against Wake Forest on Saturday night. But we shall see what happens. This has been another episode of Orange Weekly presented by Crouse Health. My name is Brent Axe. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.